It's always so nice to see you. Laura, you've done the advanced diploma with us. I met
Uh-huh.
you a few years ago through the mentoring, so we know each other pretty well. But as I mentioned, it's always really nice to spend a bit of time with you. And thanks for spending half an hour or so with myself and our listeners to talk about coaching goals.
You're very
So,
welcome.
how are you doing today?
Good. Just trying to
Good.
stay warm, bit like
Same,
you.
same. I got my cozy jumper out, as you can see, but it's also
Yeah,
when
I've
I'm
got my
feeling.
heated blanket on.
Yeah, good stuff. We're all ready then. We're all comfy. So, Laura, for those of our viewers who might not know who you are, could you just tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about yourself and your coaching?
Yeah, sure. So I am Laura Ogilvie-Jones, and that's the name of my business. And I'm a career and life coach. Prior to that, I was in the world of education, and I also did well, I kind of worked in the business side of education too, but also I did some headhunting as well before then
Mm,
training. So yeah,
yeah. And what
that's
got you
me.
into coaching then?
Well, it's probably quite a long story for now, but essentially, and actually, this is a really funny thing,
Mm,
is that I found a diary that I had written in about probably 12 years ago now, but it was about and in there I'd done some sort of coaching type questions. I can't remember what it was, a book that I was reading or something, and
mm.
it had said, all the kind of your goals and things that you want to achieve in life, and one of those was to be a life coach.
Oh
And I only
wow.
found that about, well, it was about a year ago, and I was like, oh wow, I had no idea. So I decided, so it was lots of things to do with, I knew that I needed to have a career change. I wanted to have a career change. And actually, I did some work with a coach myself, and it was brilliant. And I really loved those sessions. And I knew that I just needed to get out of what I was doing. I wasn't brave enough initially when I was doing the coaching sessions to just take the leap to create my own coaching business. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I did a stint doing the headhunting as a kind of halfway house, which sounds a
Yeah.
bit weird, but for me it was. And then I went back to the coach and said, no, I think actually I want to do what you're doing. So she was ICF accredited. She'd actually done training down in London. There was another friend of mine who was a coach. So the two of them really helped me in terms of figuring out what kind of training qualifications I needed and wanted to do. And so that I knew it was ICF. And then I did my initial course with a company up here in Edinburgh. And that's obviously how I met you, because you were doing some work for them. And then obviously did my advanced diploma, and I'm just about to get my PCC. And that's been via you and become coaching. So,
Yay! Yeah, can't
yeah.
wait for that. I've got the champagne ready to celebrate.
Oh. Fingers crossed then.
So what's really nice in there to hear is that in a way that's a lovely segue into our conversation today about coaching goals, because
Yeah.
finding that diary, which had your reflections or your journals, and one of the things that
Mhm.
you talked about was becoming a coach, and
Yeah.
now here you are, 3.5, 4 years over,
Yeah.
long down the line, and you're applying for your PCC,
I know. I
which is
know. It is.
amazing.
It is. Yeah. And I think it's good to remind yourself of that sometimes. And I always
Hmm.
love that when I do my sort of six initial coaching sessions with someone I'm working with, that final session where you do the reflection piece,
Hmm.
sometimes they have more light bulb moments in that final session than in all the others,
Yeah.
because actually doing that reflection where you look back and you almost like can have a conversation, well, like that's what I get to do, so almost have a
Mm.
conversation with their previous self
Hmm.
about, well, what would you say to yourself back then? You're like, yeah, actually, do you know what, and I can achieve these things, I can do these things. And to have those kind of dreams and aspirations and goals is really important. But anyway, I know we're going to get into that in a bit more detail, but I think reflecting back is a really useful part of that process.
Yeah, completely. So perhaps, as I mentioned, today's topic for the podcast is all about how do we set successful goals? How do we work with clients in terms of goal setting?
Yeah.
And let's start maybe a little bit more around the type of clients who you work with. Do you work within
Yeah.
a specific niche? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So I'm a career and life coach. That's what I call myself. As you know, kind of, if you're particularly an ICF accredited coach, you can coach pretty much in any area. But I think in terms of that niche thing, for me, it made sense. I've got a careers guidance qualification as
Hmm.
well. So, and that kind of was my area of interest and I guess expertise. I kind of brought in the life coaching bit because obviously the clients who come to me, yes, they all come in terms of, I am stuck in my career or my professional life. It could be that they're stuck because they are being passed over for promotions, or they want to be on the leadership team, or or it could be that they're maybe a business owner and they want to take their business to the next level, or they want to set up their own business. Or, of course, as a lot of them come to me and say, is I need a complete career change. Now, that doesn't always
Yeah.
happen. That's always not always necessary. But it's about that feeling that they're unfulfilled, they're unhappy, they feel like they're on the hamster wheel, they've kind of fallen into some kind of career or job, and they don't want to be there, and they want to have some kind of change. So that's kind of where they come to me. What's always important is right at the beginning we talk about where they're at, what kind of help they want, and how I can potentially help them. But I always emphasize that point that this won't just be about your career and professional life. I will work with you holistically, as in you, say if it was you, Joseph, the whole person, because we don't just operate in these little segments. So it's, you don't just have kind of Joseph, the career person, but it's of course things that happen in your career will also affect your life and vice versa. So it's important that we kind of take into consideration more than just their professional life, but actually look at how that might affect other areas of their life. And often in that initial conversation, stuff will come up about family, about relationships, about money. So, automatically it's sort of crossing over into other areas of their life. So yes, all of my clients and people I work with, it's the common theme is the kind of career professional part of their life that they're stuck in. But when I'm working with them, it will always be other things on top of that. And for some, like, I'm going to think back to some of my clients, one, came out of not a healthy relationship at all. And that actually was for her, the thing that she was getting stuck about. She thought it was her job and career, but it wasn't. It was this relationship. For another, it was about sort of more health type issues. Somebody else, it was more money related stuff that was going on for them. So I love that bit. That's the fascinating bit for me is what is really going on here. And obviously there are some where, it is just a career thing and we can focus entirely on that, or it's a leadership thing or whatever it is. So it's a bit of a waffly answer, but
no, it's a great answer. It's a great answer. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that sometimes when clients come in with a particular specific career focused goals, it's important to consider other aspects in their lives that could be impacting that goal. But also this idea that actually we need to work with our clients in a very human way that doesn't just segment just like one aspect of their life and we'll look at that in isolation, but really honoring the whole of the person, all the different systems that come into play. And so how important would you think that is, that holistic approach rather than just focusing on one maybe transactional goal?
Well, for me, it's like the most important thing.
It's key, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
That was a very leading question.
It was a very leading question. Yes. No, I think, and like I said, it's so important in my coaching that is what we talk about in that very first initial discovery call. Yeah. Because if they're only, if there's someone who, because I do offer sort of more career consulting as an addition to the coaching. So if they're saying to me, no, I just need some help sorting my CV out to get another job, then I'm a bit like, I'm not sure that coaching is the right thing for you, because, that it is, yes, that is, a service that I could provide. But actually, if we want to do coaching, it will get much more below the surface around the bigger things, around their purpose, their vision, their goals, but also challenging some of those things and the limiting beliefs and, that kind of glass ceiling that create for themselves and all that kind of stuff, So, I don't, like, my coaching style is not transactional at all. It's definitely transformational. And so, I think, and generally, by the time we've had that conversation, that's what everyone wants anyway. Because to be honest with you, if you're saying, I want to be more satisfied, more fulfilled, happier, more content, then this is not just about fixing your CV.
Completely.
Far more than that.
It's a much it's like a bigger picture approach, right? Totally. Rather than just targeting that one thing. So we're saying this exploration is key for us to really set goals intentionally. What could be some other things that you think we need to consider in order to set successful goals?
Well, how I work with people, and this is sort of in terms of
Mm.
that goal setting thing, is you need to kind of figure out where you are right now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I always do a piece around that. And now I use the wheel of life or something similar, wheel of work, wheel of employability, whatever
Yeah.
it is. But I think it's important that people know what is going on for me right now. How am I feeling about all these different areas of my life? Which of these areas of my life, particularly, or my professional life, that are really causing me the obstacles? So we do a bit of a kind of deep dive in that initially to kind of get that, where are you right now in terms of how you're feeling about everything? Because that will also help narrow down to, okay, I think it's probably this thing or these areas that are not going according to plan, and these are not where I want to be. So that will help with obviously the goal setting stuff as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's, I think, it is important to do a bit of reality checks. If you're not,
Mm.
if you're not clear about that from the start, then the goals might not align with where you are anyway. You know?
Spot on. Yeah, and we
Yeah,
see that quite a lot in new coaches, right? There's this preoccupation to get to the goal,
yeah,
and in a way, we don't do a thorough assessment of where are we at now,
yeah,
what's currently
totally.
happening in our life right now. It's
Yeah,
like setting a PDP with goals of things that we want to achieve, but we're not examining the kind of skills that we have, the behaviors that we're
yeah,
using now. And so that gap between where we are now, and where we want to be isn't actually really clear because we don't have
no,
that baseline measure, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think, it's that kind of understanding of where I am not in terms of where I want to be. So it's like, what is not going well, and getting really clear about that. And
Hmm.
then what I do is obviously do that zooming out piece and I do a little visualization, just getting them to think about them and their life in sort of 12 months time. And it may well be that is focused on career and professional life, but actually what happens during that is it often, I would say 90% of people who do that visualization, the image they have is nothing to do with their job, which
Mm,
always fascinates me because that tells us both that there's something much more about this in terms of
yeah.
fulfillment and feeling happy and content,
Yeah.
etc. So that we do the visualization, we do then set an inspirational goal on the back of that, which is not kind of necessarily what you might think in terms of goals like SMART goals or SMART targets. And it's purposefully not a SMART goal or SMART target. It's much more emotive about,
Hmm.
this is the kind of person I want to be. This is the kind of life I want. This is how I want to feel, that kind of level. And then what we're doing is then, like you said, bridging that gap then between the reality of where they are now and this future version of themselves that they want to be.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So it seems that what is important here as well is matching somebody's values, what's important to them, to this inspirational goal, not just simply, I want to change jobs, but the
Yeah.
meaning of that. What will that job change give you? Why is that important to you? What really matters here?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And it's about, so what, I guess sort of how I frame it then would be,
Hmm.
okay, this is where you are now. This is where you said you want to be. This is the kind of person you want to be. This is the kind of life you want. This is how you want to feel, and they will actually have got some words around that too in terms of the inspirational goal. And for some, then that develops into something a bit more like a vision board or some images or whatever. And again, like I said, it's always interesting that it's often that image is not related to their job. But anyway, the core essence of it is really just how they are feeling internally, when they are feeling amazing, because
Mm.
again, it's important that you know what that feels like. Because
Hmm.
if you, and because, often in terms of people's careers and their jobs, thinking, well, I know what it feels like when I'm unhappy and I don't want to get out of bed on a Monday morning and I feel like I'm on the hamster wheel, and every day I come home and
Yeah.
I'm angry and frustrated. So they know what those feelings are like. But actually, what's the other side? When things are going well and you're feeling amazing and your career's like absolutely, you're nailing it. What does that actually feel like for you? So
Mm.
again, it's that kind of really honing in on that difference between these two different points.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then it's about, okay, so once we kind of know what those are, what do you need to do, or what do you want to look at in terms of your career and professional life? But actually, again, it could be any area of your life in terms of what you want to change in some way, what you want to address, maybe what you want to create something new that is going to help you get to that place you want to be and
Yeah.
be that person you want to be.
Yeah.
So, and again, they wouldn't necessarily know at that point how they're going to do it. It's just about identifying, yeah, I think if I look at that thing in my career or life, that's going to help me if I can somehow change it or address it or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of just getting broad picture stuff initially.
It's interesting that you say that, and I'd welcome your thoughts on this, because there's something that I see as well in my own clients, that sometimes that there is a difference between somebody's vision or somebody's dream and somebody's goals.
Yes.
And it seems to resonate with what you're saying now. So they'll come to coaching about a goal they want to achieve in 5 years' time. Like, I want to have my business at a particular point in time, and they know it's going to take them 2, 3, 4 years. And what I try to do is focus a bit more around, well, yeah, that is your vision, that's your dream. Thinking about our coaching program, we've contracted for 6 months together for a year. Where do you want to be on that path to getting there? Because I think sometimes it can get a bit confusing between that big vision and how we're going to get to the vision, and actually then chunking that down and thinking a bit more practically in a way. I mean, I don't want to stifle that vision or that dream, but also I want to get a bit of a container for the coaching program so that we can then more skillfully work through the time that we have together. I mean, what do you think?
Well, so I think this is exactly the same as what I do with my clients. There is a difference between how you feel and then what the practical actions are that could lead to that. Now, often what people start with is they start with what are the practical actions that I need to do?
Yeah.
But actually, I think that's the wrong place to start from. I think you need to start from, okay, how will you feel when you achieve that thing, when you get the certificate for your course, or whatever it is that, get that new career? How will that make you feel? Because actually, if you're just focusing on the end point and you haven't got an emotional connection with that, then you're much less likely to achieve the thing anyway. And also, this is the bit where obviously we're doing the work across the 6 sessions when I work with my clients, is that you start off down one route and you think, yeah, that's the thing that's going to get me there. And then partway through, there's a massive obstacle or barrier or something that comes up, or you realize I am not at all. This is not leading me where I want it to go. And this is not making me feel. I'll give you an example. So one of my clients, this is just a couple of weeks ago, actually, she had set herself these 3 things she wanted to do at work. So one was to have a meeting with someone, one was to send an email to someone, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we came to the next coaching session and she said, well, I've not done anything. And I was like, okay, well, that always is useful information anyway in itself. I love it. It's like, right, well, let's have a look at what's going on here. And actually, she wasn't emotionally connected to any of those things. And she said, it just feels like something I should do. And it's on my to-do list and I don't want to do them. So well, clearly, you're not connected to these things at all then. And this is not what you should be doing. So then we went back to okay, let's go back to that image and that sort of vision and that inspirational goal for you. How do you want to feel? And let's look at some other alternatives. What do you want to do then that would make you feel more like this? And she was like, well, it's probably this, this, and this. So saying, okay, great. And that was a really useful exercise. So and these 3 things that she came up with were completely different routes and area that she was going to explore. I think that was almost that aligning piece, because the actions that you set yourself in a practical day-to-day, month-to-month, whatever it is, quarter-to-quarter, they have to be aligned to that end picture. Otherwise, you're not going to do them. You're not going to achieve them. They're not going to be meaningful for you. And they're not going to end up, taking you where you want them to.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so interesting, right? Because that is the part where the real coaching work happens, I find, where things get a bit challenging for the client, because the client could have been thinking about those 3 action points for weeks or months. But the exploration that happens in terms of how they feel in relation to those goals, what that tells them about them, the pressures that they might have found from the systems that they're in terms of these are the type of goals that I should be having versus the type of goals I want to have.
Yeah.
That's
always
work.
for me the flag point. As soon as I hear that word should,
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I'm just gonna let's just dig a bit deeper there.
Let's
Should for
see.
who? Who is that should for?
Yeah.
Because usually it's for someone else, or it's, oh, well, that's probably what, the world thinks I should do, or my boss, or,
Mm.
other people in my life. It's what do you think you should do?
So what we're saying is that there needs to be some emotional connection to the goal. We need to
Yeah.
assess our kind of our current reality, where we are now, looking quite holistically at all the different things. Then how do we support somebody actually either stick to the goals or do check-ins to make sure that the goals are still valid? Because like you said, some of these goals might change in time.
Mm,
How do
mm.
you work with that with your client, this kind of goal maintenance in a way?
Yeah. Well, the onus is always on them. So, and I always say
Mm-hmm.
to them, I'm not going to be a teacher who's going to tell you off for not doing your homework,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
So they set them, but we kind of craft these together as well.
Mm.
Um, and do a bit of a sense check around, does this feel appropriate? And then I will ask them the question, how do you want, or rather not even, how do you want me to help you in terms of accountability? And then how do you want me to help you in terms of accountability? Because that is part of the process. And I think that's a really important part of the coaching process, is to be there as an accountability buddy for that person if they want that, and
Mm.
not everybody does. Some people no, it's okay. I've got my partner who I'm telling them all about this, so that's fine. But actually, sometimes they really appreciate that, is actually saying, no, do you know what? By the end of today, I'm going to email that person, and then I'm going to send you an email and tell you that I've done that thing. Or I'm going to, if you, or sometimes, can you check in with me in 2 weeks just to see how I'm going? And in that case, I just send an email, I know
Mm.
that you asked me to check in with you. How's it all going? But again, the onus is on them. They're asking me if they want that support. I also offer Voxer support, which is just like it's a business version, sort of WhatsApp. And again, for some, it's easier to just send a quick voice note. Right, I've done that thing I said I was going to do. So I think that can be really helpful. If someone between sessions, I've had no communication with them, which is often the case, that's totally fine. Then again, I won't sort of start this next session saying, right, how'd you get on with your to-do list? Because it's not very helpful. But
Yeah.
more,
And
yeah,
as you're saying that, and you might smile at this, it's reminding me of how we are so different as coaches, right? Because I, in a way, do I don't do any accountability checks, like this, because we talked about it before.
yeah,
Um, so it's important for anyone as well who is listening to think about, how do I want my coach to support me in terms of these
yeah,
goals, right? Because different coaches will have different approaches, how they work with goal setting.
yeah.
And it's important to think about, what is it that I want from my coaching relationship? What is it? How do I want to work with my coach?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, this has evolved because I think I operated a bit more like you, whereby it was the session and that was it. But I think over time, what I realized was that actually still there's 80% of my clients don't take me up on the offer anyway, as in, like,
Mm,
we just do the session, they then get on with their goals and actions, then we just check in next session. But I think for some, it's that kind of, okay, there is that extra level of support if I want it. And even if they don't take me up on it, I think it's sort of part and parcel of a bit of a business model for me, as in
mm,
that's a kind
mm.
of something that, is there as a sort of additional support if they want it. And
Yeah,
for others,
yeah,
they found it really helpful, as in I get a detailed report of everything that's happened between sessions. And that's fine, because then,
yeah.
that's useful for them bringing into the next
Exactly.
session.
I think that's the key word, isn't it? It's useful for them. And
Yeah.
that's what we'd be checking as coaching. Are they doing this for me, to
Yeah.
please me as their coach? Is this the kind of dynamic that is happening? And even from a transaction analysis point of view, like
Mhm.
what kind of patterns am I seeing as a coach? Or are they doing this for themselves?
Yeah.
And in a way, I'm a conduit to all
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
I've just
Totally.
noticed the time, and we're getting quite close to the end of our podcast, and there's so many
Oh,
things that I still want to talk to you
that
about. So let's start in a way unwinding down our conversation. So
okay.
for those individuals who might be listening and thinking about setting some goals, what are some techniques or obstacles that you would say they need to be aware of when it comes to goal setting?
So I would say they need to be very aware of they're setting their goals for themselves and not because
Hmm.
they're trying to people please in
Mm.
whatever capacity that is. Are you emotionally connected to your goals? If you're not, they're not going to happen. It's as simple as that. So I think there's that check. I think for a technique that I will often use would be around what inner dialogue is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, again, those obstacles and barriers, they're our own obstacles and barriers. They're our own things that we're telling ourselves, like, you're not good enough for that. You can't ever achieve that thing. You know, all that kind of stuff that's going on. So I think it's really important to be aware of that. And often what happens when we set ourselves new goals is the bit of inner dialogue that is often that kind of younger version of ourselves, the not helpful version of ourselves, the one that's that is sort of fed by fear, will start being really loud, as in, because you're putting yourself out there by saying, right, I want to achieve this thing by this time. And then this little inner dialogue goes, you can't do that. You'll never achieve that. Who do you think you are for doing that thing? Imposter syndrome, all of that stuff creeps up. So it is really important that you know what's going on with that. And I talk to my clients a lot about that, because what we really want to do is be operating from the other side of the inner dialogue, which is the much more compassionate, emotionally mature side of us, saying, it's okay, we've got this, it's going to be fine, you can do this thing. So it's about dialing down that younger inner dialogue, which is the one that's driven more by fear, you know, the unhelpful one, and try to dial up the more helpful, compassionate, kind one. And that little technique is and yes, it is sort of CBT-esque style, but it's really helpful, I think, whereby it's like giving that, you know, it's listening to that side of you that say you can't do that. And it's like, okay, have your say, have your voice, and I'm going to hear you. But actually the other part of you gives that metaphorical hug of, look, we've got this. It's going to be fine. I know that you're really scared by this goal that you set yourself, but we've got this. It's going to be okay. So I think noticing that and what's going on is really helpful when you're goal setting. So
Great.
yeah, that's a little bit of technique.
Great. Yeah, it's I can really resonate with that. This idea of noticing things. Sometimes we go through, goal setting through life, and we don't really notice these voices in our heads, and we don't differentiate between what is really me and what I want to do versus what are my thoughts, essentially. There's a different, again, we're going into a bit of CBT-esque type of a discussion, but it is really useful just noticing and differentiating between those different voices. Like I can think something and I might absorb the information and I might believe that's who I am, but actually it doesn't have to be. Just because I've thought something doesn't mean that I actually believe that.
Yeah, totally. And often that inner dialogue comes from, somebody or something else anyway,
Those shoulds that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But it's back to that whole being emotionally connected to it. And I think that's the thing, is that every time that you are trying to grow or push yourself or move in a different direction, fear is going to kick in. That's just and often the reason people don't reach their goals and don't achieve what they want to is because of themselves, and it's their own stuff going on that prevents them from doing that. Yeah.
Great. Well, Laura, I won't take too much more of your time today, but I want to thank you so much for being with me today, for discussing this topic. I know that so many viewers will find this helpful, because it's a question that we get a lot around, goal setting. How do I set more realistic goals that I can achieve? So thanks for sharing a bit of your insight and a bit of your practice as well.
You're very welcome. It's been great speaking to you, Joseph.
Same here. Take care.